Judges at the International Court of Justice on Monday sided with Equatorial Guinea over Gabon, ruling that the three smaller islands of Mbani, Cocotier and Conga, found in the Atlantic Ocean, belong to the country. The 15-judge panel found a 1900 treaty between Spain and France, which divided up colonial holdings, to be the ultimate authority.
Hey, Breakdown family. Okay, so here's the headline. The United Nations Top Court, the International Court of Justice, just handed Equatorial Guinea a major win in its long-running dispute with Gabon over a few tiny uninhabited islands in the Gulf of Guinea. Now, if you're thinking, why should I care about a couple of random islands most people couldn't even find on a map? Stay with me, because this case isn't really about geography. It's about power, oil, colonial history, and how international law is still sorting out the mess Europe left behind in Africa. The islands, Conga, Cocoteros, and Mbani, may be small, but the waters around them are packed with potential oil wealth. And whoever controls them, well, controls a whole lot more than sand and shrubs. This ruling could redraw maritime boundaries, shift economic fortunes, and even set a precedent for how other African border disputes get resolved. So how did we get here? Why did the ICJ back Equatorial Guinea over Gabon? And what does this say about the way African countries are still untangling the web of old treaties, colonial lines, and new economic ambitions? We're going to break it down. But first, a big welcome to all of our new subscribers and members. I'm so glad you're here. And if you're watching and haven't joined us yet, please consider this your personal invitation. Because here at Genius TV, we're not just building a channel, we're creating a global home for Black stories that are told with truth, with intention, and with power. And if that speaks to you, hit subscribe, tap the bell, drop a super thanks, and join our membership community where we go beyond the headlines with exclusive content, behind the scenes conversations, and a front row seat to the dialogue shaping our future. All right, now let's get into it. Okay, so to really understand how we got here, we've got to rewind to the colonial scramble for Africa. Back in the late 1800s, France and Spain were busy carving up Central Africa, drawing borders like kids fighting over a birthday cake. Now, if you want the full messy backstory of how European powers divided the continent without African consent, check out my episode, The 1884 Deal That Broke Africa. It's got everything you need to know about how these artificial borders still shape conflicts today. So at the Berlin Conference, the so-called Scramble for Africa, Equatorial Guinea became Spain's territory. Gabon went to France. And floating in the Gulf of Guinea between these two colonies were three small islands, Mbani, Conga, and Cocoteros. Nobody paid them much attention at first, until oil entered the chat. Now here's where it gets murky. The 1900 treaty between France and Spain set some rough boundaries, but it was vague. The islands weren't clearly claimed by either side. After independence, that ambiguity was inherited by Gabon and Equatorial Guinea. And of course, as long as the islands seemed worthless, no one made a fuss. But fast forward to the 1970s and 80s, when oil exploration in the Gulf of Guinea started heating up. And suddenly, those tiny specks in the sea were sitting on billions of dollars worth of potential energy. That's when both countries started staking serious claims. They tried to negotiate, work it out. That failed. Tensions simmered. After years of failed negotiations and a surprise claim by Gabon in 2003 regarding a disputed treaty, both countries signed a special agreement in 2016 to bring the matter before the International Court of Justice. The case was officially submitted in 2021. So this ruling isn't some overnight surprise, right? It's the final act in a decades-long standoff rooted in colonial confusion and fueled by 21st century resource politics. After more than years of legal back and forth, the ICJ finally dropped the gavel just this week And the ruling? Clear, unambiguous. The islands of Mbani, Cocoteros, and Conga officially belong to Equatorial Guinea.
The court, by 14 votes to 1, finds 1. That the document entitled Convention Delimiting the Land and Maritime Frontiers of Equatorial Guinea and Gabon, in bracket Bata Convention, invoked by the Gabonese Republic, is not a treaty having the force of law in the relations between the Gabonese Republic and the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, and does not constitute a legal title within the meaning of Article 1, Paragraph 1 of the Special Agreement.
Why? According to the court, Spain's colonial footprint extended farther into those waters than France's did. And since Equatorial Guinea inherited Spain's territorial claims after independence, it gets the islands too. Gabon's argument? They claim they'd exercised, quote, effective control over the islands for decades, managing fishing rights, patrolling the waters, even building temporary structures. They also argued that a later treaty, the 1974 Bata Convention, had fixed the island's sovereignty in their favor. Guinea's argument? That Gabon invaded the islands in 1972 and had occupied them illegally ever since. They rubbished the Bata Convention, saying Gabon suddenly produced the document in 2003, surprising everyone. Domingo Imba Isono, Vice Minister of Mines and Hydrocarbons from Equatorial Guinea, told ICJ judges, quote, no one had seen or heard of this supposed convention. Moreover, the document presented was not an original, but was only an unauthenticated photocopy. On the Guinea side, they admitted that they can't find the original document because it was drawn up in an era before computers and database. Marie-Madeleine Imborantu, honorary president of Gabon's Constitutional Court, said, quote, sadly, neither of the two parties can find the original document. Archives were badly managed because of a number of things: unfavorable climate, a lack of trained personnel, and lack of technology. So the court ruled in favor of Guinea, noting that the Bata Convention, quote, invoked by the Gabonese Republic, is not a treaty having the force of law and does not constitute a legal title. It said that the legal title to the islands was held by Spain, which then passed to Equatorial Guinea upon independence in 1968. Basically said that Gabon's argument was not enough, and that historical sovereignty dating back to the colonial maps carries more legal weight than ad hoc enforcement or symbolic gestures. Now let's talk about the real prize here. This ruling doesn't just shift some rocks in the ocean. It redraws the maritime boundaries in one of the most resource-rich parts of the Gulf of Guinea. We're talking about billions in potentially oil and gas revenues. That means new leverage for Equatorial Guinea in energy negotiations, exploration licenses, and even regional influence. And for Gabon, well, this is a blow, right? Not just to its territorial ambitions, but to its energy strategy moving forward. It's also a political embarrassment, a high-stakes case they've pushed for years, only to come up short. But this case isn't just about Gabon or Equatorial Guinea. It sets a precedent. Across the continent, there are similar disputes simmering below the surface. The ICJ just sent a message. Colonial-era documents, even if vague or outdated, still shape modern sovereignty. So what does this ICJ decision really mean beyond a few oil-rich islands? Let's start with the regional geopolitics. The Gulf of Guinea is already a tense neighborhood. Piracy, oil, theft, territorial wrangling. And now, with this ruling, Equatorial Guinea walks away with a legal win and potentially billions in new oil revenue. That kind of financial boost could shift the balance of power in Central Africa. It also gives Equatorial Guinea more leverage with regional blocs like ECCAS and OPEC. And don't forget, control over maritime space means control over strategic sea routes, which matters in a region where foreign navies are always watching. For Gabon, this is a moment of reckoning. It's not just about losing territory, it's about losing face. Domestically, there'll be political fallout. Internationally, they'll need to recalibrate their diplomacy, especially as they compete with neighbors for energy investment and development partnerships. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Africa's reliance on outside courts to settle internal disputes. Let's be real. The ICJ isn't an African institution. It's based in The Hague, run by mostly non-African judges, and rooted in legal frameworks that often prioritize colonial-era documents over indigenous claims or local history. Yet, when disputes like this flare up, whether it's land, water, or maritime rights, African countries still go knocking at the doors of Europe's legal temples. Why? Because we don't fully trust our own systems. The African Court on Human and People's Rights, underfunded, underused, and often ignored. The AU's legal organs still trying to find their footing. So we outsource justice to The Hague, hoping for fairness in a system built without us. And sometimes, like in this case, the outcome might seem fair on paper, but it also reinforces a deeper problem. Africa is still playing by rules it didn't write. And that leads us to the bigger problem. It's starting to look like unless a Western institution makes the ruling, African countries aren't willing or maybe aren't able to resolve their own disputes through diplomacy. And that's a serious problem. Take the Yanga border dispute between Guinea and Sierra Leone. We covered it here on the breakdown not too long ago. This is a tiny strip of land on the eastern edge of Sierra Leone, right along the border of Guinea. During Sierra Leone's civil war in the early 2000s, Guinean troops moved in to help stabilize the region. But after the war ended, they never left. Since then, Sierra Leone has insisted that Yanga is part of its territory. Guinea, at various points, seemed to agree. There have been multiple agreements reaffirming that Yanga belongs to Sierra Leone. But nothing changed on the ground. Guinea still controls the area. And now, 2 decades later, the dispute is flaring up again. And the kicker? There's no serious mechanism within West Africa or the African Union that's actually stepping in to mediate or enforce a resolution. So what does that say? Are we really saying that unless the International Court of Justice steps in, we're just going to sit on unresolved conflicts indefinitely? That unless someone in The Hague tells us what to do, we'll keep pretending like these issues don't exist? Or, worse, continue to engage in conflict and violence? This is the deeper issue Africa faces. A failure to build trusted, independent conflict resolution institutions of our own. We inherited colonial borders, yes, but instead of proactively managing those legacies, we outsource our disputes to foreign courts. Or worse, we let them fester until they explode. Yanga is a test, not just of Guinea's integrity, but of the region's ability to hold its members accountable. Because how can we demand that Gabon honors the ICJ's ruling on the islands when Guinea won't even honor a bilateral agreement with its own neighbor? Until we start treating our own agreements with the same seriousness we expect from international courts, Africa will remain trapped in a cycle of dependency, waiting for someone else to solve problems we should be solving ourselves. So here's the million-dollar question. What would it actually look like if Africa handled these disputes on its own terms? Because let's be clear, it's not that we don't have institutions. We have the ECOWAS, we have the African Union, we've got regional courts and peace and security councils. On paper, the infrastructure exists. The problem, they're underfunded, underrespected, and underutilized. Let's imagine a different scenario with this Gabon Equatorial Guinea case. What if, instead of waiting for the ICJ in The Hague, the two countries brought their dispute to a respected, empowered African court? What if the African Union had a standing legal body with binding authority, not just a consultative role, and the political will to enforce decisions? What if Africa had a culture of honoring those rulings with the same seriousness we give the ICJ? It's not impossible. ECOWAS intervened in the Gambia in 2017 when Yahya Jammeh refused to step down after losing an election. And it worked. That was African leadership standing up for democratic norms and regional peace. Now imagine if we extended the same energy to land disputes, maritime claims, and border tensions. Imagine if African leaders started seeing mediation not as a weakness or a concession, but as a strategic move, a sign of regional maturity. But that takes vision. That takes investment. And most of all, that takes trust. Trust in our own institutions, in our own judges. Yes, in our own diplomacy. Because here's the thing. As long as we keep outsourcing justice, we'll keep outsourcing power. And Africa cannot afford that. At least not anymore. So maybe the question we should be asking is, when will Africa build a system that we don't have to borrow, beg, or buy into because it's ours? So my people, where do we go from here? After decades of silence, a colonial era ambiguity has finally been resolved. But not by us, not by African-led institutions, not through Pan-African diplomacy, but by a European court that was never built with Africa in mind. And sure, maybe the ICJ's ruling settles the specific case. Gabon's out, Guinea is in, but zoom out, and the bigger picture is still blurry. Because from the islands in the Gulf of Guinea to the Yanga border between Sierra Leone and Guinea, from the Nile disputes to the endless redrawings of Sahel alliances, one thing keeps coming up. Africa doesn't have a crisis of disputes. It has a crisis of resolution. Until we build systems we trust, decisions we honor, and unity we're willing to fight for, we'll keep dragging our problems to foreign courtrooms. And maybe the most uncomfortable truth is this. If we can trust each other to solve our own problems, why should anyone else trust us to lead our own future? So here's my question for you. What would it take politically, economically, and culturally for Africa to finally stop outsourcing its problems, its sovereignty, to everyone else but the continent itself? Let me know what you think in the comments. Now, if this episode moved you or you learned something new, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone, subscribe to our channel, and consider joining our membership community where we go deeper beyond the headlines. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Sandra Bebu Boateng. Until next time, take care. Hey you! Thanks so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe and join the family. Also, visit face2faceafrica.com for your daily news and updates on what's going on within the global Black community so you can stay informed.